all the victories that you have won. As joy comes with the rising sun. Kodiaga Allah for giving us your only son.
Thank you for joining the podcast of the International Committee on Nigeria, also known as ICON. I'm your host, Tay Pam. Due to the increasing violence around the world, we know that you can be overwhelmed of the negative stories around the violence around the world, and even stories like the stories Priscilla shared the last time on the podcast could be more overwhelming to you. But we need to go ahead and keep on sharing the voices of the victims of these terrorist attacks and this silent slaughter, especially in Nigeria, so that we can find a practical solution out of the situation that we're in. Last week's podcast was about the women in Nigeria and how they're navigating to live life even in the midst of this silent slaughter. Today, ICON co-founder Stephen Another will be joining me to talk about the men in Nigeria and how they are living in the midst of this silent slaughter and these attacks, especially on their women and their children. Stephen, you're welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you, Tay. How are you doing today? It's my pleasure to be with you again.
I'm fine, and it's always a pleasure to be with you and to hear what you have to share with us and the whole community on the podcast as usual. I'm going to jump right into it by asking, as someone who has witnessed the Nigerian violence, how did you process that whole experience?
Yeah, Tay, you remember in 2001 when there was a crisis in Plateau State, to be precise, Georgetown. You could see the plight of women and children, but what men did was to confront, because they did not know what exactly is attacking even their community. So with that, many men lost their lives because they were confronting the attackers with just cordials, sticks, while the attackers have weapons, guns. So over 3,000 lives were lost in that. So from time to time, when there is crisis like this in Nigeria, men usually lose their lives because they want to protect their families. And currently, the fate of many men in villages and towns in Nigeria is that of sleeping in the bush and then coming out in the morning. That is if they survive any attack. So you look at their women and children have been ferried to a safer community, and then they have to just stay by to protect their ancestral lands, making even many men to have lost their lives in the process.
Yes. So you went right into the next question I was going to ask, and it sounds crazy, but that's the reality of the situation on the ground, especially having been someone who has witnessed all these atrocities, in back in Nigeria. So the next question I was going to ask is, how are the men protecting their families? How are they protecting their wives and their children from these attacks?
Yeah, they are protecting their wives and children with their lives because government is unable to protect them. And then the core responsibility of any man or any family man is to protect his wife and his children. So in this regard, even though there are still ongoing attacks recorded every day in Nigeria, these men have dared to stand to make sure they protect their families. And that is why at the wake of these men taking that responsibility, we have many widows and many fatherless children in the wake of these men trying to be men to their children, and to their wives. They are still there, and like I said, they've lost their lands, and some are still sleeping in the bushes, rain beating them, not having even anywhere to go. So that is the dilemma of many men in these trouble spots in Nigeria.
That is really very, very true. I mean, like most of the time when those crises were happening, we were always faced with the challenge of either we'll fight or flight or run. So it was always a fight or flight situation. And how would you face a terrorist group that has sophisticated guns with stones and sticks? So yeah, it's really painful, but that's the reality on ground. So my next and last question to you is about still on Nigerian men. Do you feel like the Nigerian men are being pressured to end the violence in Nigeria? And if they're being pressured to end the violence in Nigeria, how do they plan to stop the violence in Nigeria? The men, to be precise.
Well, it is except the truth of the matter is that men in this circumstance cannot end the violence. We are talking about terrorism, terrorist activities, attacks. We are talking about organized army of terrorists coming and attacking sleeping community with high caliber weaponry. So they don't really have I don't see any group of men or community organizing themselves that can confront these terrorists with lethal weapons. So it is going to be a combination of different forces, Nigeria government admitting that they are failing, and Nigeria government doing what is right by arresting these terrorists and prosecuting them, and the international community coming to the aid of Nigeria government, who actually has not been able to do anything that has shown remotely that this crisis will be brought to an end. So in that regard, men are vulnerable like any other citizen because they don't have any weapons to defend themselves with. So yeah, it's just going to be more men will be killed in the coming days, and not just more men will be killed. Now, what people don't know is that there is also the economic aspect of these attacks, these terrorist activities in Nigeria. And the economic aspect of it is that those who supply weapons are profiting from it. Then also, what is going on is female slavery, because once girls, teens are abducted, they are sold. They are sold into slavery. It is just like people auctioning vehicles. Then the boys who actually are the teenagers also are recruited as child soldiers. This is what is going on. So it is really a big cartel. You can compare it to drug cartel, and you can compare it to any other terrorist activities anywhere in the world. That is similar pattern. So men can't defeat the terrorists. They can defeat it maybe if government empowers them with weapons, or they conscript them into a transparent army to fight and ward off these terrorists attacking and killing.
This is really overwhelming, because it's just frustrating and overwhelming, and I can see how it can be overwhelming for our viewers and our community. But this is the same reason why we share the stories of victims and the need for us to come together to stop this silent slaughter in Nigeria. Thank you so much, Stephen, for always coming over and sharing all this knowledge and wisdom with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. That's all we have for you today on the podcast. We will very much appreciate it if you visit our website on www www.iconhelp.org and be part of what we're doing. Get involved. You can also visit our social media platforms on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter and see what we're doing, be part of what we're doing. And let's just join hands together, join our hearts and our hands together to stop this silent slaughter happening in Nigeria. Thank you and have a beautiful weekend.